My fiancé said, "Betrayal, my ex proposed to me yesterday and I said yes." Sure she'd chosen better, I told the truth to the only one who mattered. Imagine this, the woman you've loved for years, the one wearing your engagement ring, looks you right in the eyes and casually announces she just said yes to another man. And she says it like she's just won an award, expecting you to be happy for her. That's how my entire world imploded. The stale airport smell still clung to my uniform as I walked into our apartment, the silence heavier than usual. I was utterly exhausted, having just landed after a brutal 3-day flight rotation, dreaming of takeout and collapsing on the couch. But the calm, almost serene look on Chloe's face, waiting for me at our kitchen table, told me my day was far from over. I'm Noah, I'm 33, and I fly regional routes. Up until that precise moment, I genuinely thought the most stressful part of my life was navigating crosswinds. I'd just survived the kind of trip where you wake up at 4 a.m. in a bland hotel in Tulsa, wondering if the lukewarm coffee maker is even worth the effort. And all I wanted was my fiancé, Chloe, our couch, and some greasy food. I always called her right after landing, every single time, and she always picked up. That's why I hadn't thought twice when she asked what time I'd be home. She was waiting, and she had that weird, rehearsed look, a mix of nervous and determined that screams, "You're about to hear something you don't want to hear." Chloe sat down, folded her hands like we were in some corporate meeting, and announced she needed to be honest with me. She's 30, works in pharmaceutical sales, beautiful in that polished way that looks effortless but absolutely isn't. And then, she dropped the bomb. She'd been having lunch with her ex-boyfriend, Liam, for the past 2 months. And she genuinely believed it wasn't cheating. No, she called it just talking, working through old feelings, being mature about complicated emotions. Then came the words that carved a hole right through me. "Liam proposed to me yesterday at lunch, and I said yes." She said it with a smile, the same one she'd wear if she announced a promotion. Like she expected me to celebrate her personal growth. I just stood there, still in my uniform, my overnight bag clutched in my hand, my mind reeling. Had I fundamentally misunderstood how relationships worked? Or had I just spent 3 years with someone who thought monogamy was, well, optional? She kept smiling, waiting, and I could see it in her eyes. She truly believed this was a mature conversation. She explained she'd said yes to Liam because she'd only been with me because I was stable and safe and convenient. She actually used the word settled. Settled. Like I was a placeholder until something better came along. She hoped I'd understand that she was following her heart, choosing passion over comfort, real love over just getting along. The whole time she spoke, she looked like she was doing something incredibly brave, like this was her heroic journey, and I was just a discarded chapter. I finally found my voice. "Are you seriously telling me this while wearing my ring?" She glanced down at her hand, as if she'd forgotten it was even there. She pulled it off, slowly, deliberately, and set it on the table between us. "I wanted to do this the right way," she said, with honesty and respect. It wasn't her words that shattered me then, it was her absolute calmness. As if she'd made a difficult decision and deserved applause for handling it so maturely. She sat there, hands folded, looking at me with what I can only describe as gentle pity, like I was a puppy who just got told we weren't going to the park. "Get out," I heard myself say. She looked offended. Genuinely offended, as if I was being utterly unreasonable by not wanting to dissect this betrayal further. She stood up, grabbed her purse, walked to the door, then turned back. "I hope you'll eventually be happy for me, Noah." She actually said that. Like I was supposed to process being blindsided and arrive at a state of gratitude. 20 minutes later, a text popped up. From Chloe. "I know this is hard, but I really hope you can appreciate that I was honest instead of going behind your back." I stared at that message for 10 minutes, trying to comprehend the kind of person who believes they deserve praise for efficiently blowing up someone's life. The sheer audacity of asking for credit, for wanting me to thank her for destroying our future so directly, made me wonder if I'd ever truly known her at all. That night, I called my sister, Sarah. Woke her up, even though it was past midnight. She listened, silently, to every agonizing detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that hit me harder than anything Chloe had said. Chloe didn't confess because she felt guilty, Noah. She confessed because she wanted permission. That was it. That was the truth. Chloe hadn't come to me with remorse or shame. She'd come expecting understanding, maybe even my blessing. The next day, her parents called me. Both of them on speakerphone. I thought, finally, maybe an apology. Maybe they'll acknowledge their daughter just did something insane. Instead, her dad launched into a speech about Chloe making a difficult choice and how they hoped I could respect that she'd followed her heart. Her mom chimed in, saying, at least Chloe hadn't cheated. She was brave enough to be honest. And Noah, you seem to be taking this all too personally. Too personally? Like my fiancé leaving me for another man was something I should view objectively, a news story happening to someone else? How exactly am I supposed to take this? I asked. Her dad responded, these things happen. The mature thing would be to wish her well. I hung up without another word. I just sat in my apartment, wondering if I was losing my mind, if I'd somehow stumbled into an alternate universe where basic human decency just didn't exist. For the first few days, a dark thought gnawed at me, had I done something wrong? Missed the signs? Failed her somehow? Was being a good boyfriend just not enough? I flew my routes, came home to an apartment that felt too quiet, and wrestled with how someone could spend 3 years with you and call it settling. The word echoed in my head. Settled. Like I was a consolation prize she'd accepted while waiting for something better. Alex, my co-pilot and closest friend, noticed I was off during a flight to Nashville. He caught me staring blankly during our descent checklist. After we landed, he cornered me in the crew room. I gave him the short version. He just stared, then said, "Brother, that's not normal." You know that's not normal, right? Hearing someone else confirm I wasn't crazy for being devastated, that this wasn't some normal breakup I was overreacting to, helped more than he'll ever know. The worst part was how completely Chloe had rewritten our relationship in her head. Like every shared moment was just her biding time. ITH. Out of our trip to Asheville last fall. How she'd held my hand on the hiking trail, telling me she couldn't wait to marry me. How she'd picked out flowers for a wedding that, apparently, was never going to happen. Was she lying then? Or had she convinced herself it was true in the moment, only to decide later it was never real? Was she the kind of person who could feel something deeply, then later disown that feeling entirely? I couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus. I kept replaying that conversation, searching for the moment I'd misunderstood who she truly was. Alex saw how bad it was getting. He told our supervisor I needed time off, basically forced me to take a week of personal leave. I spent those days in my apartment, trying to piece together my shattered life, drinking too much coffee, scrolling through old photos like I could find some clue I'd missed. That's when I made a mistake. I looked Liam up online. LinkedIn first, same pharmaceutical company as Chloe, which explained the convenient lunches. Then Facebook. Every single post featured his mother. Every single one. Birthdays, holidays, random Tuesdays. Just him and his mom, doing normal things that, when viewed collectively, felt deeply abnormal. The comments were worse. All from her, Brenda. Things about her special boy, how proud she was, how nobody loved him like she did. He was 34 years old. I kept scrolling, desperate for anything not about his mother, any evidence of an independent life. Then I found it, a post from 2 weeks prior about his engagement. No mention of Chloe. No photo of them together. Just him standing alone in front of a restaurant, vaguely talking about starting a new chapter. I stared at my phone, and that's when the true horror hit me. I hadn't just lost my fiancée to another man. I'd lost her to someone who apparently couldn't make a single decision without his mother's approval. I considered calling Chloe, asking if she knew what she was walking into, if she'd noticed the red flags that were visible from space. But then I remembered she'd called our 3 years together settling. And I figured she'd made her choice. Passion over stability, excitement over safety, and, apparently, a man whose Facebook profile looked like a shrine to maternal devotion. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out just how catastrophic that choice really was. I spent the next few days in a fog. The kind where you go through the motions, but nothing feels real. I'd wake up at my normal time, make coffee, then realize I had nowhere to be because Alex had put me on mandatory rest. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe at that table, calmly explaining how she'd settled for me, and I'd jolt awake with my heart racing like I was in an emergency descent. My apartment felt wrong. Contaminated. Every corner held a memory I didn't want anymore. I'm trained not to panic when an engine fails. Trained to run through checklists when everything's going wrong. But my brain had decided that the word settled was worth more attention than any actual emergency I'd ever faced. Alex showed up on the 4th day with takeout, refusing to leave until I ate something. He sat across from me at my kitchen table. "You look like hell, man," he said. He wasn't wrong. I hadn't shaved, barely showered, same shirt for 2 days. He asked if I'd heard from Chloe. I told him about the text, the one asking me to appreciate her honesty. And he actually laughed. Not a kind laugh. The kind of laugh that means someone's done something so profoundly ridiculous you can't even process it. "Noah," he said, "you need to stop torturing yourself and start figuring out who you'd actually been engaged to. Because the Chloe you described doesn't match the woman who just blew up your life with a smile." That night, I went deeper into Liam's social media. The more I looked, the worse it got. He lived exactly half a mile from his mother. I found that out from a post where he tagged his location as Brenda's house, mentioning popping over for dinner, which seemed to happen about 4 times a week. His emergency contact on his company profile? His mother. Not a spouse, not a sibling, his mother. Photos of them at restaurants, at movies, at the grocery store, doing everything together like they were a couple instead of a parent and adult child. I found posts from his friends making jokes about it, gentle teasing about how he should update his relationship status to complicated with a photo of his mom, and he'd just respond with laughing emojis like it was all just good fun. Then I found something that made me sit up straight. There were no posts about Chloe. None. No announcement that he was engaged. No photos of them together. Nothing to indicate he was in a relationship at all. The engagement post I'd seen earlier was just him, alone, vaguely talking about new chapters. And when I checked the comments, Brenda had written that she was so proud of her boy for making mature decisions. Not congratulations. Not welcome to the family. Just pride that he'd made a decision she apparently approved of. I screenshotted everything. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd need proof later that I wasn't making this up. The next morning, I called Ethan, a friend from college who'd known Chloe back then. Someone I hadn't talked to in maybe 2 years, but who'd been around during her first relationship with Liam. I asked him what he remembered about them. There was a long pause on the phone. The kind of pause that means you're about to hear something you really, really won't like. He asked why I wanted to know. I told him Chloe had left me to go back to Liam. He said one word, no. Like I'd just told him she was walking into traffic. Then he told me the story. Chloe and Liam had dated 7 years ago, back when we were all in our 20s, still figuring things out. They'd been together for about 8 months, apparently serious, talking about moving in. Then one day, Liam just ended it. No warning, no discussion. Just stopped answering her calls, blocked her number. Ethan said Chloe had been devastated. Spent weeks trying to understand. Kept asking mutual friends what she'd done wrong. When someone finally got through to Liam, he said his mother didn't think they were compatible, and he needed to respect her judgment. His mother didn't think they were compatible. Chloe had been ghosted because a 30-year-old man's mommy said no. Ethan said he'd always wondered if Chloe had really moved on, or if she'd just been waiting for another chance. "Guess you have your answer," he finished. I hung up, trying to process it all. Chloe had left me for a man who'd dumped her because his mother told him to. A man who'd broken her heart so badly her friends still remembered it 7 years later. And she thought this was choosing passion over settling. I felt sick. Not just hurt anymore, but genuinely nauseous. Simply followed orders, the same way he'd dumped her 7 years ago when Brenda disapproved. Chloe thought she'd won him back. Thought she'd been chosen. But really, she'd just been accepted by the only person whose opinion Liam actually cared about. I sat there, staring at my screen, and something shifted in my brain. I'd spent a week thinking I'd lost, thinking Chloe had chosen someone better. But now I understood the truth. She hadn't upgraded. She'd volunteered for a nightmare. Signed up to spend her life competing with a mother-in-law who saw her as property her son was acquiring with her permission. For a moment, I actually felt sorry for Chloe. And then I remembered how she'd smiled while telling me she'd said yes to someone else. How she'd asked me to appreciate her honesty. How she'd called 3 years of my life settling. The pity disappeared fast. That's when I realized something else. Something that made me pick up my phone. There was one person who didn't know the whole truth yet. One person who was making decisions based on incomplete information. And that person controlled everything in Liam's life. Brenda had approved Chloe this time around, but she didn't know Chloe had accepted Liam's proposal while still wearing my engagement ring. Didn't know Chloe had been planning a wedding with me just 2 months ago. Didn't know her precious son was the other man in an overlap. I opened a new message and started typing. Kept it simple. No emotions, just facts. I didn't ask for anything. Didn't demand anything. Just laid out exactly what had happened and when. I attached a screenshot of Chloe's text about appreciating her honesty. Proof that she'd been engaged to me while having lunch with her ex, proof that she'd still been wearing my ring when she'd said yes to Liam. Then I put my phone face down on the table and waited. I didn't know what would happen. Didn't know if anything would happen. But I'd done exactly what Chloe had done to me. I'd been honest. I sent the message to Brenda at 9 o'clock in the evening, then put my phone in a drawer and tried to sleep. I didn't expect an immediate response, figured maybe she'd ignore it or Liam would intercept it. But I'd done what I needed to do, and now it was out of my hands. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and a text from Alex asking if I'd done something insane because someone from Chloe's company had been calling around asking what was going on. I made coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my phone to find out what had happened. Apparently, Brenda had driven to Chloe's office first thing in the morning, walked straight past the reception desk, and found Chloe at her cubicle. The entire floor heard everything. The screaming about lying and manipulation, about trying to trap her son, about being the kind of woman who overlapped relationships and expected to be rewarded for it. Security had to escort Brenda out, but not before she'd made sure everyone in that building knew exactly what Chloe had done. Jessica, a woman from Chloe's office who I'd met at a company holiday party, sent me a message describing the whole scene. She still had my number from Chloe's contact list, probably from when Chloe was organizing the party last year. Jessica said it was the most dramatic thing that had ever happened on their floor, and Chloe had locked herself in a conference room afterward. She said Liam had shown up an hour later, not to defend Chloe or calm his mother down, but to do damage control on his own reputation. I wasn't there. Didn't see any of it firsthand. But apparently, the entire pharmaceutical sales division of their company had front row seats to Chloe's life falling apart. My phone rang that afternoon. Chloe's number. And I almost didn't answer. When I did, she was crying. Actually, truly crying for the first time through this entire thing. She said she didn't understand what had happened. She said Liam had called her that morning and told her they were done. Said his mother was right about her character. Said he couldn't be with someone who'd overlap relationships like that. She kept saying it wasn't fair, that she'd been honest, that she'd done everything right. I asked her if Liam had used those exact words. My mother was right. She went quiet. Then she said yes. And I could hear in her voice that she was finally understanding what she'd signed up for. She asked if we could talk, really talk, maybe figure things out. No, I told her. She'd made her choice, called our 3 years settling, humiliated me in front of her parents, and now she wanted to come back because her backup plan had exploded. I told her I hoped she'd eventually be happy, using her exact words from that night, and hung up. She tried calling back 6 times, sent messages saying she'd made a mistake, that she'd been confused, that what we had was real and she'd teach her. Yes, because this meant she knew exactly who Liam was and had chosen him anyway. That afternoon, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove past his mother's house. Didn't stop, didn't get out, just drove by slowly like I was looking for an address. It was a normal house in a normal neighborhood. Nothing special. But there were 2 cars in the driveway, and one was the exact model I'd seen in Liam's photos. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday, he was at his mother's house. I kept driving, went home, and opened my laptop. I found Brenda's Facebook. Liam's mother. Her profile was public, probably because she wanted everyone to see how proud she was of Liam. Every post was about him. Every single one. Baby photos, childhood stories, current updates about his life like he was her entire personality. She posted about his job promotions, his hobbies, his opinions on movies, literally everything. There were posts about his previous relationships, too. And I found one from 7 years ago, right around the time Ethan said they'd broken up, where she'd written something about how grateful she was that her son had the wisdom to recognize when someone wasn't right for our family. Our family. Like she and Liam were a single unit, and everyone else was an outsider trying to get in. I found posts about other women, too, girlfriends who apparently hadn't lasted long. And Brenda always had something to say about why they weren't suitable. Too career-focused, too independent, not family-oriented enough. Then I found something that made everything click into place. Brenda had posted about Liam's engagement. But it was weird. Talking about how she'd finally approved of his choice, how this time he'd listened to her about what qualities mattered in a wife, how proud she was that he'd made the right decision. This time. Like Chloe had auditioned before and failed, and now she'd somehow passed whatever test Brenda had created. I realized Liam hadn't proposed to Chloe. Not really. Brenda had approved Chloe, and Liam had owned it away for nothing. After the 6th call, I blocked her number and went back to work. Alex bought me a drink after our next flight together. Told me I looked better than I had in weeks and asked what had changed. I told him I'd realized something important, I hadn't lost Chloe to someone better. I just avoided being chosen for a disaster. The story got around somehow. I think through Chloe's coworkers. And over the next few weeks, I heard updates I didn't ask for. Liam was already seeing someone new, a woman his mother had apparently introduced him to, someone more appropriate according to Brenda's standards. They were engaged within 3 weeks, which would have seemed insane, except by that point, I understood Liam didn't make decisions. He just followed instructions. Chloe's reputation at work was destroyed. Everyone knew she'd been engaged to one man while having secret lunches with another, and the fact that it had blown up so publicly meant there was no way to spin it. She'd wanted passion and excitement, and instead, she got humiliation and unemployment rumors. Sarah called to check on me one evening, asked if I felt guilty about sending that message to Brenda. I thought about it, honestly, before answering. I told her I didn't. I'd done exactly what Chloe had done to me, been honest about an uncomfortable truth. Let someone make decisions with complete information. Sarah laughed. That's the most diplomatic way I've ever heard someone describe revenge. I told her it wasn't revenge, it was consequences. Chloe had made choices. I'd made choices. And neither of us got to control what happened after that. I sold the engagement ring 2 months later. Used the money to completely redo my bedroom. New mattress, new sheets, new everything. I went on a few dates. Nothing serious, just reminders that there were women out there who didn't see relationships as additions for something better. I ran into Chloe's mother at a grocery store about 3 months after everything. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but couldn't figure out what. I nodded politely and kept walking. Didn't give her the chance to tell me I'd taken things too personally or that I should have been more understanding. The thing about flying is that you learn pretty quickly how to handle emergencies. You train for every possible disaster until your response becomes automatic. You don't panic. You don't freeze. You just work the problem until you're either safe or you're not. That's what I'd done with Chloe. Worked the problem, made the decisions I needed to make, and landed safely, even if the approach had been incredibly rough. I thought about her sometimes. Wondered if she'd figured out yet that Liam had never actually chosen her, that she'd been approved, like a purchase his mother had signed off on. I wondered if she understood that the passion she'd been chasing was just the drama of trying to win over someone who'd already broken her heart once. Mostly, though, I didn't think about her at all. I flew my routes, came home to an apartment that felt like mine again, made plans with friends who hadn't asked me to appreciate being discarded. 6 months after Chloe had sat at my kitchen table and announced she'd said yes to someone else, I was fine. Not heartbroken. Not angry. Just fine. I'd thought I was being replaced, that she'd found someone better and left me behind. But really, she'd just volunteered for a life where she'd never be anyone's first choice. And I'd been honest enough to make sure everyone involved knew exactly what they were choosing. Chloe wanted credit for her honesty. Wanted me to appreciate that she'd told me the truth instead of sneaking around. So, I'd given her the same courtesy. Been honest with the one person who actually made the decisions in Liam's life, and let the truth do whatever it was going to do. Turns out, honesty isn't always kind, but it's always fair. What do you think? Was I justified, or did I go too far? Let me know in the comments below. I'm reading everything. And if you enjoyed this story, drop a like and subscribe for more real-life narratives.